Do, 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 do. Greetings and salutations on this fine evening. You don't mind if I clean my glasses for 5 seconds really quick? 4, 3, 2, 1. There we go. I'll edit that out. Don't worry about it. Actually, quite often get inspired by incredibly stupid videos that are on the tube or other places, and I made note of the fact that I'd not made a video explaining energy, and it is the case that no branch of science has actually ever defined the term energy. You could say, well, you could look up on Wikipedia, say, well, energy is the ability to do work. That actually doesn't tell you what energy is. No branch of science has ever defined the term energy. They never defined the term field. Intrinsically, they've also too, well, they outright reject the ether, but they've replaced it with something that's completely implausible, inaccurate, and laughable. That is, of course, atomism and relativity. I love it when people like to use the word quantum, too, by the way. You know, there's nothing in nature that you can point to and say that's quantum right there. There is nothing in nature that you can call quantum, but this video is not about quantum, rather about energy, so people are arguing whether energy is a concept or whether it's a property of something. These physicists will say it's a number, or you can find on Wikipedia it's the ability to do work, which is not descriptive of the term energy. All of these, of course, are completely inaccurate. People, too, by people I mean all of humanity, is completely confused. It's an actual metaphysical axiom that humanity sees everything upside down and backwards. People, of course, are always confusing principle with attributional self-division. I'd like to use a really simple rubber band analogy here in a second, but people confuse potential energy with kinetic energy, but the kinetic energy that everybody points to, like mushroom cloud from a fissionable lump of uranium or plutonium, that's not energy, that's the impotency, the complete opposite of energy. The dissipation of energy we point to is not energy, but that's what everybody calls energy. That's representational of the energy that exists. And people get confused when they say, like, I'm creating new definitions for stuff like inertia, the original definition for inertia, but that's the original definition of pure non-Cartesian potential. In other words, inert, kind of like a softball-sized lump of plutonium or uranium would be, in its current state, inert. The same is true of the ether. Potential, of course, creates a lot of different confusions, which I'd like to get here to, but that's the original definition of energy, inertia. We use it in actually a different fashion today, connotatively, like forward inertia and inertia relative to kinematic time frames and whatnot, but that's not the definition of energy. Light and illumination is another perfect one. Light, of course, is the principle, and illumination is its extrinsic attribute. Illumination, of course, is the energy as manifest. That energy, of course, is a division of light. Unless, of course, it is point source light or it is coherent light, that's another matter, but it is going forth. It's the attributional nature, the extrinsic side of light, because nobody sees light, for example. They see, of course, illumination. So we have principle and attribute. We have polarization of what is inert. What is inert, i.e. inertia? Pure potential. Now, in the case of the ether, that is non-Cartesian pure potential. The ether, of course, is not a particle. It is not composed of things, which would be contrary to the very definition of the term inertia, or of the ether, excuse me. And inertia and ether are one and the same thing. There are different means of describing about pure potential, which has no Cartesian value. And that, of course, confuses scientists which deal in objective reality. But, of course, objective reality is technically unreal, but that's a matter for discussing holography, the holography of the universe. So, polarization of inertia is energy. This is, of course, potential, this snapback and the dissipation of rest as kinetic energy, like a rubber band. I don't have a rubber band in front of me, but I don't know if you've ever actually pulled a rubber band. Well, everybody has pulled a rubber band back, especially if you cut it in half and you ever stretched a rubber band across your lip, you actually feel this heat, and as you actually let it contract back to its inertial or its rest point. You actually have a dual entity here. In the case of light and of energy, human beings confuse potential energy and kinetic energy, but kinetic energy is not energy, it's the inverse of energy, i.e. the dissipation of energy. Then when you're actually pulling a rubber band apart, you're actually creating a disparity where, of course, you have a contractive potential that is being built up where it wants to return to its inertial point. This is, by the way, is the original definition of inertia. Pure potential. But of course, measuring potential is not measurable because it has no Cartesian value. Of course, we could say X number of grams of potassium nitrate has X amount of joules of potential energy, which of course are measurable because we have past experiences of chemical reactions of certain things like potassium nitrate and all sorts of chemical reactions, of course, where we can actually know potential measured in joules, watts, volts, amps, so on and so forth. So energy is not a what, rather in most cases, of course, a how. But the how is manifest as never energy, rather the dissipation of energy once again. Energy is capacity. And of course capacitance is inertia, or rest. It is inert. No energy is being expressed. If we, of course, have history with this particular object or medium, as is the case with the ether, because an AC generator, by the way, doesn't generate power. It manifests power by introducing a temporal variant, in the case against a copper reflector in a magnetic field, and you introduce a temporal variable, you have the manifestation of electricity. And of course the guidelines along which it is directed, but it is not actually generating anything. I've spoken about this in other videos. Anyway, pure potential. This, of course, is a definition of the ether. Energy as capacitance. Capacitance of what is inert, the inertia or rest. Potential or position, position as potential energy, of course, is alive. Actually, I've been reading this growing up, and you were taught the same nonsense, like if you stick a car on the top of a hill, it has greater potential. If I take this stone, actually it's not a stone, it's a piece of lead, and I actually elevate it, they'll say it actually has greater potential energy. Changing the position of something does not change. They will actually say, and you can find countless thousands of websites on academic websites of universities, of physics labs. Well, changing the position changed the potential energy. It has more potential energy, like taking a super huge rock and sticking up on the edge of a cliff. It has greater potential to smash something underneath it. But potential energy is, of course, not possessed. You can't say by changing the location of one thing relative to the other, such as the earth relative to a rock, or this particular lead ball relative to the earth, changes the potential energy, or that the potential energy of this thing is changed. I mean, that's completely ludicrous. And it fascinates me that the ineptitude of these people that would actually think that you've actually changed something of the attribution or qualitative nature of something by changing its location. This is completely ludicrous. Position, of course, is not property of either objects. Rather, the potential is declared of the field torsion relative between the two objects, in the case of a rock or a boulder, or this lead ball and the earth, in the case of mutual mass acceleration, by changing its position, but nothing of the property or the quality or the attributes of any object is changed. Keeping it simple, since we can know that humanity always sees everything upside down and backwards when we see impotency of energy as energy, and it is not energy at all, because true energy is inert. It is inertia. Once again, and I've had several people recently talking about inertia say, oh, I like how you try to redefine the term inertia. It's like, that's actually the original definition of the term inertia, i.e. energy. The field, of course, is an ether perturbation modality, as I've said thousands of times. The ether is inertial. It is, of course, the medium. Energy, of course, is inertia. True energy, not the impotency of energy. Energy, of course, is the division or parceling out of inertia, and that, of course, is the impotency of energy, but it's what all humanity identifies as energy, where work is being done. But when work is being done, you've created the division or parceling of inertia. In the case of a rubber band, you actually have to exert energy to stretch that rubber band out. But when you stretch that rubber band out and you parcel out its inertial rest, you create another disparity, which of course is always dual, just as the case of a magnet. We say a magnet has a north pole and a south pole. It's of a dual nature. It's not. It's the inverse of counter space. Counter space is inertia, is the rest point. And stretching out that rubber band, yeah, and dissipating energy. And when, of course, if you stretch rubber band across your lip, everybody should do that. It's a great little science experiment for kids. Like when you stretch it out across your lip, it feels hot. And when you let it contract against your lip, it, of course, feels cold. When you stretch that rubber band out, are you not also, too, inducing the polarization of the energy or inertia of that rubber band? Yes, because if you let go of the rubber band, it will want to snap back towards its inertial mode, or its rest point, which is inert. Polarization of both energy and the polarization of what people call magnetism. These are all one and the exact same thing. Force and motion, inertia and acceleration. The dissipation of force or inertia, i.e. the dielectric or the plane of inertia, manifesting as a centrifugal force vector. Walter Russell called this the dissipation of energy along east-west. By east-west, he means centrifugal. And when he says north-south, he's referring to centripetal, i.e. increasing inertia and acceleration, towards the point of inertia or rest. Did you know that most lead in the earth, something like 98% of lead, used to be uranium? The rest of uranium, through its half-life, where it turns into lead, through the release of radiation, the centrifugal release both of gamma radiation and alpha particle emission, its rest inertia is this. I actually have this covered in rubber tape, but this is a ball of lead, actually. So this is the inertial point of most uranium. Lead is not a naturally occurring element in the universe. It is the rest no inertial mass variant, or the actual, looking for the words, the periodic table elemental rest inertia of uranium. All uranium turns into lead. So energy is the division or the parceling of inertia. So let's make this really simple, since we now know what energy is and what it is not. It's certainly not a concept, it's not a property, it's not a number, as these quantum folks like to talk about. The ability to do work does not define energy. Like say a horse can pull hay, or a horse can pull a carriage. Well, this is true, and that's wonderful. Makes horses useful, but that doesn't tell you what the hell a horse is. Light and illumination. Let's get back to the really simple analogy. Principle and attribute. Energy is the parceling or attributional or extrinsic side of the inertia point of a medium. Of course, light is a complex field modality, which of course is no different than an ether perturbation modality. But what's the inertial point of light? Well, what causes light to manifest? The release of energy. Nobody sees light once again, they only see illumination. So it's the division of inertia. The division of inertia is seen in the polarity of a magnet. It is seen between the conjugate fields of magnetism and dielectricity, which makes up that which human beings call electricity. The very, very simple thing that human beings call electricity, as Charles Sprotius Steinmetz accurately said, is the consubstantiality of magnetism and dielectricity. But magnetism is no different than saying the energy impedancy of the loss of energy or inertia of the dielectric. But these two in consubstantiality make phi times psi equals q in Planck of electrification, that which human beings call electricity. When you understand what electricity is as a compound conjugate, explaining how an electromagnet works becomes really easy. Explaining electrical phenomena becomes really, really simple instead of really, really complicated. There's all these things that electrical engineers are told to believe in, which are true, but they don't easily explain electricity. But if you understand what electricity is as this hybrid consubstantiality between magnetism and dielectricity, which are a conjugate whole, then understanding these phenomena becomes incredibly easy. So this impedancy of energy, i.e. true energy, is inertia. It is inertial. i.e. inert. Inert, inertia. People and human beings, people, have a really, really, really hard time wrapping their mind around something that has no Cartesian value or footprint. Something so totally inert that you wave your hand through it. You know, fish don't realize they're swimming in water. Human beings, when they wave their hand, don't realize they're, flapping their, running their hand through pure potential, i.e. inertia. This is the reason why AC generators don't generate power. When you introduce a temporal variant against a dielectric reflector, copper winding, using a magnetic field, then spontaneously, from the medium, of which it is a medium modality, electricity manifests. So an AC generator is not a generator at all. It doesn't make something, it makes something appear, which by definition is magic, but you're conjuring up something. This invisible line between physics and metaphysics disappears when you truly and genuinely understand just one little aspect of which. And there are many different examples that, an AC generator doesn't generate power, it manifests power. When you truly understand that all of humanity is everything upside down and backwards, they see the impotency or release of energy as energy. It's the total opposite of that. They don't understand that this thing between my hands, forgetting the oxygen and nitrogen, i.e. the medium, is the place that has no place, with no Cartesian value, from which power manifests, given the specific arch form that human beings call an AC, AC motor. This is what Eric Dollard meant in saying all these AC motors were nothing other than arch forms. Indian, ancient Egyptian, ancient Indian arch forms. The frigging dream catcher of the, I think in the Navajo, were the first to represent the dream catchers. I could be wrong in the Native Americans. That's an archetype of the magnetodielectric constructive and destructive interference between magnetism and dielectricity that you've seen over 1,000 plus ferrocell videos that I myself have even made, over 1,000 of them. Power is rest. Inert, inertia. Power is just nothing other than a euphemism for energy. This is the reason why these scientists and these materialists, these atomists, they even Richard Feynman said, if anybody tells you they understand what, I think Richard Feynman says something to the effect that no branch of science today can tell you what energy is. And he's right, because they can't comprehend it. Excuse me, I still have a little bit of cough left. Genuine energy or power, another euphemism thereof, is the ether. No Cartesian value. It is completely inert. In its rest, it is inert. The rest of uranium is this, lead. Lead is not a naturally occurring element. It is the depletion of uranium. Go look that up if you don't believe me. But nobody's taught this stuff in high school or college. It is really, really simple, because nature is that simple. And yet I do not joke when I tell you that no branch of science has ever defined the term field, and they sure as hell have never defined the term energy. They themselves admit this. They say, well, energy is potential or it's kinetic. If it's kinetic, it is the inverse of energy. And it is potential, we're talking about something that's completely inert. Unless we know, well, X number of grams of potassium nitrate has X amount of potential kinetic release of energy, not energy itself. That's history. That's what we've learned. This many grams of so-and-so chemical element will have this many joules, watts, amps of release of energy. We say release of energy, we're not meaning energy, rather the impotency of energy. So, Energy is really simple, and yet it is so sublime it actually confuses the hell out of all of academia. Energy is not a concept, it's not a number, it's not a property. And human beings really have a hard time wrapping their mind around something that is completely inert. Such as the ether. Here we have 1 cubic meter of ether. A little bit bigger than that. So there's nothing there. You wave your hand through it, you can't feel it. Yeah, but when you stick an arch form in it, and you vary the magnetic field with respect to time, this 1 cubic meter of ether will produce a tremendous amount of electricity, because the AC generator is not generating like baking a cake where you're building something. AC generator is not making electricity. It is causing electricity to extrude from the ether itself, just like when you squeeze a tube of toothpaste. Imagine some caveman. You can sit there and play with a tube of toothpaste all he wants, but it's like, well, you just unscrew the top and squeeze it, and then this stuff comes out. Well, when you have an arch form and you vary the magnetic field with respect to time, if you went back before the days of AC generators, 150 years, somewhere around there, say, I have 1 cubic meter of ether right here, and from it, I can get enough power to power a small city. I mean, they laugh at you like you were nuts. Yeah, but I have to have an arch form with a specific geometry, vary the magnetic field with respect to time, and this 1 cubic meter of ether will produce prodigious amounts of electricity. Oh, you're crazy! Yeah, but that's exactly how it works! This is the reason why Oliver Heaviside said of the large AC motors of his time, they're churning up the ether, which is exactly what's happening. Like squeezing the toothpaste, in the case of toothpaste would be the electricity, it's being squeezed from the ether, and it's the ether itself, it's an ether perturbation modality, electricity is, and a hybrid thereof also. That sounds mystical and magical. But the only reason why it sounds that way is because there is no dividing line between physics and metaphysics. These people can't define energy and they can't define a field. And yet they want to divide physics and metaphysics like they're two different things? I mean, well, that's just intellectual lunacy. Anyway, I rest my case. I love to talk about this subject endlessly. I hope I didn't talk too long. If so, I humbly apologize. Thank you. Lux e veritas. Goodbye.